to the Cascadia Poetry Festival. Tonight we're here to celebrate the launch of a brand new anthology, Make It True meets MEDUSARIO. Contributors are here, the translators are here, and 2 of the 3 editors are here. I will be introducing one of them, I'm one of them, and the 3rd editor, Jose Kozer, was released from Island Hospital today. He's going to have to drink a lot more water in the near future and take it easy. He will not be participating in the events of this festival or the Elliott Bay launch Sunday at 3 o'clock. But he did have a desire for ice cream, so I think things are looking up. So my name is Paul Nelson. I'm the founder of the Seattle Poetic Slam and the Cascadia Poetry Festival. And I'm delighted you're here tonight. We have an excellent lineup. And then after this reading, there's going to be a Pleasure Boat Studio showcase. So there's going to be poetry till 11 o'clock. So if you haven't been full yet this weekend, you will be full soon. And then a whole day tomorrow. Tomorrow, 2 panels in the morning, Cascadian Zen at 9 a.m. Put the Zen people early, I figure. And then right after that, that's my logic. And then translation as a political act. Living room and open reading where you can read original work in a circle like we had today will be 3 to 5 tomorrow. And then the main stage tomorrow will be the launch of the Sam-thology and then the after party, which promises to be lively. I do want to thank, first of all, I want to acknowledge that we're on the ancestral homeland of the Samish, Swinomish, Tulalip, Lummi, and other coastal Salish tribes. So we're standing on their ground and we recognize that and we want to acknowledge that. We also want to acknowledge some of the sponsors of this event, the City of Anacortes Lodging Tax Fund, and the Anacortes Arts Commission has been fantastic. So I'm very, very grateful for what Anacortes has done to make this happen. Arts Wall, the Washington State Arts Commission, Cascadia College, Copper Canyon Press, the Fidalgo Culture Foundation, How It Works, and Chris Terrell, who's been amazing, Humanities Washington, Pleasure Boat Studio, Poets and Writers, the Sumud International Cultural Association, SICA USA, and the SPLAB Board and key volunteers. Can I have SPLAB Board members stand up? Kate's already standing up. There's Trease, there's Nadine Maestas. Jared, you're a key volunteer, you should stand up. Thomas Walton should stand up. So these are some of the folks who make SPLAB go, and I'm grateful to them. This is an amazing evening to be able to talk to Jose, who said, you know, we should put out like a series of journals that are based on Rosemary Waldrop's Burning Deck, and she was doing German and English, but he wanted to do Spanish and English. And we talked about it thanks to For Culture, which was the King County Arts Commission. They helped bring him to town and helped with some of the funds to make this happen. Thomas Walton worked his ass off to make this book a reality. And Lauren Grosskopf designed this book, and it's incredibly beautiful. And I think this is a very important book. So you are here tonight as it's being launched. And please welcome your Master of Ceremonies, Thomas Walton.
Thank you so much. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this beautiful space also. And these incredibly comfortable chairs. A round of applause for the chairs. All right. 3 hours in those chairs last night.
Nothing like
don't worry.
Croatian folding chair.
Yes, it's a Croatian folding chair. Tonight, it's 4 hours. All right? Tomorrow night? All right. I'm going to read some poems, just some short, simple little poems, and then introduce our other readers. Okay. These are all new. I'm not going to read. I have a few poems in the anthology. I'm not going to read from them because, spoiler alert, I don't want to, you know. So these are all new poems. This one doesn't even have a title. They're also very strange. And I apologize ahead of time. I was in the record store staring at the cover of Surrealistic Pillow, noticing the peculiar shade of pink, but mostly the font, annoyed they chose surrealistic and not surrealist. Wishing I had been there to say, How about surrealist light post or surrealist gloom? Or perhaps more artfully, ceci n'est pas un bip. I was convinced I could improve at the very least what I perceived as too properly adjectival, as well the saccharine too soft pillow. I was convinced of this when I noticed I was coming back around in the record store, despite myself, to an appreciation of the world as is, as Cage proposed, as Blake in so many words. The world perfect, but for the way in which we see it. Surrealistic now was just fine. In fact, it was the perfect word, le mot juste, and pillow too, just right, and actually couldn't be better. There were 2 copies of what surely was and is the best named album of all time. The Sonnets to Orpheus of classic rock, and the Flowers of Evil of psychedelia. I bought both copies, why not? One to remind me of my poor judgment, and one to eat for dinner that night. Thank you. That was the only funny poem I have. This one also doesn't have a title. The social implications of the political turn meant madness and near-apocalyptic panic for most everyone living in the city where I was watching the pear blossoms wave in small gestures, in small breaths of air, wondering if their message this year was different than their message, say, 100 or 1,000 years before. This poem starts with a line that I stole from Stephen Collis, and when I confessed that I had done that, he confessed that he had stolen the same line from Phyllis Webb. And who knows who she stole it from. This one is called I Want You to Know That I Mean It All. I should apologize for another poem about lilacs. Not lilacs, but paddlefish, fish of a family. Not them, but dying, not dying, but life. Not life, but a gathering of lilacs, fish, dying. So as to stretch as much as possible this miscellany, the lilacs and paella made with rice, not rice, but saffron. Not that, but praise of paddlefish and dying. An exultation in any order, not order, but river, a river of lilacs. Not river, but rush, not that, but the sound in the word, the phrase, a river rushes jubilant. Not that, but lilacs, 100 lilacs, some thousands dying, not dying, in ruins, colonnading, in dooryards, in bloom. What, after all, is a dooryard? What blooming, what dying? Not that, but browning, drying, a paean of fervent, gracious hymns. Not hymns, but rushes, not river, but fervor, not this, but that, the both the same, and dying, not dying, but lilacs, a boat or canoe. Odd how the snow slow sails in, quiet and unassuming, even some glint of pleasure until grief grows slow, sails in, quiet, and noticing too late, all turns white, the lawn and soul, Jane's car, fjords. That wound that once lived in you now effloresces into the world from which you cannot leave. No spring in sight, no sight even, once it's spring. I'm just going to read about 35 more of these.
Yes, please.
Crossing over on the ferry out of, oh, this is about, oh, sorry. Crossing over on the ferry out of boredom more than any desire to see the same tourist traps you saw last time you were this bored, last time you felt the need to indulge misery in that certain way that small town way, so you sail to Bainbridge, or any other of these little logging towns turned taffy towns, turned antique towns, turned boutique towns, turned zombie towns, turned to stone. If you're lucky, you're alone. If you're lucky, there's a bar, and you can have a few drinks and read a while before vowing again to never come back. There's some Bainbridge haters in the room. Zombies. Everybody loves zombies. In the dream I had, the word stretcher is in this poem. In the dream I had lost my stretcher, so floating there, levitating like some Swami busker happy or willow branches, I hovered along the boulevard eating tacos and Miss Abercrombie's newly spaded Datsun. That was lacking one pink stick. One glistens, or else you mistake the piece for the pie. Who among us has even seen the pie, much less eaten it? We are doomed to crumbs and flake, this meal merely fracture a pleasure. 3 more tiny little poems. Near the waterfall, the trillium blooming, arching and waving like a restless crowd, an audience that rose and cheered when the eagle shat, a thick quart of white paint splat on the damp green moss-covered stone. Can we keep it down in the front row, please? I'd like to think these little poems, in addition to being quick sketches of willows, are also, by turns, deeply concerned with the barn-like collapse of a hapless culture, and if not a culture, then at least a single life. Final poem. This is reading Retke where he died. The seascape lifted, unlapping, and flooded my lungs and eyes. What a way to find Retke, bloated on gin rickeys and chlorine, floating in a blood-el pool, till a garden came and filled with sand what once was mere music and bone. Thank you so much. Okay, can we have a round of applause for Pleasure Boat Studio and Lauren? Thanks, Lauren. Okay, our next reader is Elizabeth Cooperman. After living and teaching in the Eternal City, Elizabeth Cooperman co-wrote a poetic guide to Rome, The Last Mosaic, with Thomas Walton. Great, I just found that out.
It's a good book.
Yeah, can't wait to read it. She is co-editor with David Shields of the anthology Life is Short, Art is Shorter, and has been an artist in residence at Ragdale Foundation Residency and 360 Hochi Quetzal Residency Program in Chapala, Mexico. Elizabeth is art director at Pageboy Magazine. Elizabeth Cooperman, everybody.
Hi. I want to do my thank yous too. Thank you, Paul, for your vision. Thank you, Jose and Thomas and Lauren for this beautiful book, which I'm holding. Thank you, Alex and Dana, also. The translators are here from Mexico. All of you have a lot more insight into the way the voices bounce off each other inside this book. I'm really curious how it's gonna sound and feel. And so I've just sort of been trying to imagine what Cascadians have to say to Medusarians and what Medusarians have to say to Cascadians, and also what those two things are. So I think the book will show us that. And just in imagining, I was thinking about the words cascade and baroque. So the Medusarians, Jose Kozer calls them neo-barocco, so the new baroque. So one thing I came up with is that, so a cascade is a waterfall descending off of a rocky, steep cliff, and also anything like water or fabric decadently falling and folding over itself. And actually, well, when we hear the word Baroque, we think of the art movement from the 17th and 18th century, which was a reaction to the classical form that was being used in the Renaissance. But the word Baroque comes from a Spanish word meaning, well, the Spanish word is barroco, and it means, let's get it exactly, a large, irregular shaped pearl, which was popular in the florid jewelry of the time, the Baroque era. So I was thinking, we have waterfalls, and we have pearls, and they're sort of these beautiful accidents of nature, and hopefully our own words can also be those beautiful accidents. And so I'm going to read it's a prose poem, really. It's not mellifluous in the way that your poems were just now. It's more prosy. I'm going to read that piece that's in this book, and I think throughout the night we can start to hear what this book is, little by little. I would say that maybe my contribution is actually a bit more Baroque. It's sort of ornamental, and the logic is more like a twisting column. And it's decidedly wet and concerned with water, so. And it's about 5 minutes long. The bath. In desperation to get warm, she took a bath, despite not having bathed per se since childhood. Though in retrospect, the bath was not just for warmth's sake. That day it rained continually, and she'd stepped in a puddle and sat in wet tights and socks and shoes at work. Long raindrops fell off the awnings, and the wet trees had faces, vaginas, or mouths. On the bus ride back, she thought about a machine in the locker room of the YMCA that spins bathing suits so fast they dry. Once she waited in line for it, but just before reaching the device, a lady put a diaper in. On the bus ride, she meant to look at a manuscript in her purse, but couldn't find a pen or concentrate on the opening lines. She tried to buy a bathtub stopper on the way home, but in the house found it wasn't the right kind, so kept the shower running to keep the bath filled, partly because something was wrong with the drain. She laid out a towel, a mat, a corduroy robe. She filled the tub with bubbles, but kept getting the temperature wrong. The bubbles formed a temple of larvae. The bubbles formed a sweet-smelling bell. Disrobing the egg of her body, she knew the power of the bath was contingent on its construction in accordance with rules. A bath seems simple because it is something babies take, but a bath is, after all, a made thing, like any meal or lesson. A bath is a recipe with a right answer. That night, she'd intended to relax into the bath and read the manuscript in a state of perfect omnipotence, like one might imagine a professional editor in lipstick doing, poised and supported on her bath pillow, buoyed by its softness, having a love affair with herself, and also to break little pieces of chocolate into her mouth and let them melt there with a devilish sexiness. But the way the bath water stained the back of the manuscript, she shifted and displaced the bath a little, kissing the tub walls, distracted her so much that she kept starting the first paragraph over. And she was sweating a little, so did not savor the chocolate, as she does not particularly like to eat while sweating, and so she put the manuscript down. Flipping over, her butt cheeks rose above the sea level of foam. But this pose seemed pornographic, like some cliche in a fireman's calendar, and she thought of Aang and his Valpison bather, who's actually dry and seated in the large portrait, hair turbaned in linen, not wet at all. So instead, she sat up again. A bath is a favorite subject of many painters, Cézanne, Picasso, Aang. They love to represent the blue of some pool, the amber of some unclothed torso. While working on his new tableau titled Women Bathers, Cézanne was filled with such a sex-charged anxiety that he never completed the painting. Once it got cold, she tried to bring in some extra buckets of hot water from the sink, but couldn't get the science of it. She'd read that you could actually make a fire near the bath and heat individual stones and place them in the bath once they were warm, but that sounded dangerous. She was not a very good housekeeper, and in reality, it was probably a very dirty bath. Afterwards, like a Scythian in deepest Barbary, she put sweet-smelling lotion all over and sat in front of the heater on the floor of the bedroom and continued reading the manuscript. They say that all sorts of things, like us, are full of water. For example, a peach contains it, as does a sardine. When we commune with water, we commune with some part of ourselves that we can't see, i.e. the large part composed of water, our tissues and organelles, and all of the water-dependent chemical processes that occur in them. But she wasn't compelled to connect with this part of herself. Nor, on another level, did she understand why, if we're made from it, we should have to drink so much water, or wash ourselves with it so often, or do all this boiling of our food, soaking of our legumes. There's something obscene about all the water, and the fact that the water already in us isn't enough. At the beach, lounging in bikinis, a friend told a story about developing hemorrhoids gone wrong during an overnight camping trip. It turned out that the campers hadn't brought enough water on the journey. According to the doctor, that single day of dehydration exacerbated the problem such that a nodule took form in one of the blood vessels of this friend's anus and became painful. Luckily, said the doctor, she caught it in time to surgically remove the clot. The amazing part of the story, of course, is the role of the missing water. Once, all things came from the ocean, but then creatures learned to carry it with them, either in eggshells or inside the body of female terrestrials. Some salamanders and flat-headed frogs evolved to drink through their skin. When droplets of water collect on the small white winter flowers as if in tiny tumblers, or drown things on the sidewalk, water appears beautiful, and that beauty might appeal to thirst. She knew a writer who moved and spoke so quickly he exuded an oil. He seemed, as he spoke, to sweat, to make a perfume of himself. She thought she could almost hear his metabolism rushing. Once he had asked her on a date, and though he was a nice person, she made an excuse, because there was something positively fecal about him. She herself had been born without thirst. She did not understand how people could like water. Occasionally it tasted like crystal, but more often faintly of stool. That's it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So our next readers, it's a surprise that they're here. They came all the way from Tepic or Guadalajara? Both places. They came from two places in Mexico, and they're the translators of this anthology. Alejandro is going to read the Spanish original of Carmen Berenger's Oda a mi Huerto de Pelos, and Dana Nelson will read the translation. Dana and Alex.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the editors for this opportunity, and we feel honored to be here and be part of this project. Okay.
Oda a mi huerto de pelos. Ahora recojo unas puntas y las junto a las otras y no he cepillado ni peinado, solo mojadas, mecha a mecha, las enhebro y las levanto con un soplo de vida. Como manto de olvido por el brazo herido y menea y manca levanto el vuelo. Las puntas y las engarzo con flores de coliflor y serpenteadas de tomates chicos, simulando un huerto en mi cabeza, en una escena de arte de chakra sobre mi tiznado porvenir. Al otro día revuelo los lazos de cabello y me asoman albahacas y hierbabuena y solo levanto la parte de atrás y la aprieto con una aldaba de apio. Soy, me digo, la mujer de la peinera morada, que almidona la tristeza como si yo pudiera hablar altisonante y yo quisiera sumarme a la tradición de la palabra, como si mi palabra fuera la palabra hecha verbo y fuera dueña de mi cabellera y la manejara a mi antojo, en una manada de hojas verdes, en mis negras hebras. No estoy obligada a escuchar palabras de un pequeño Dios que me ahoga con ingredientes sempiternos. Ahora suelto una cascada invertebrada, relumbra la luciérnaga intermitente, engarzando el torrente de puntas de colores para colgarla en un espino performance de mi huerto.
I want to thank the poets for their poems and having the honor to translate them. Ode to my orchard of hair. Now I gather up the ends and add them to the others, and I have not brushed or even styled them. Damp, I twist the locks together and raise them up with a breath of life. Like a blanket of oblivion for my injured arm, and one arm I pull the ends up and set them with cauliflower florets and twines of small tomatoes, simulating an orchard on my head in a scene of farm art that covers my blackened future. The next day I tussle my knotted hair, and basil and mint peek out at me, sweeping up just the part in the back. I fasten it with a celery clip. I am, I tell myself, the woman of the purple cone, stiffening the sadness as if I could vociferate, or or as if I sought to join the tradition of the word. As if my word were the word made speech, and as if I were owner of my mane, and I could direct it at will into a flock of green leaves. In my strands of black hair, I'm not obliged to listen to the words of a small God that drowns me with eternal ingredients. Now, I release an invertebrate waterfall, blinking with dazzling fireflies, linking the torrent of colorful ends to hang them in a tree of thorns. Performance of my orchard.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Alex. Our next reader is Matt Trease. That's it. That's his name. Matt Trease is an artist, poet, IT analyst, and astrologer living in South Seattle, Washington, where he serves on the board of the Seattle Poetics Lab and co-curates the Margin Shift reading series. His poems have recently appeared in Small Portions, World Lit Zine, Phoebe, Facsimile, Hotel America, Juked, and in the anthology 56 Days of August, Postcard Poems. He is the author of the chapbook Later Heaven, Production Cycles. Matt Trease, everybody.
I also want to echo thank you to Paul and Thomas and Jose for editing this gorgeous anthology. I want to give a shout out to Alejandro and Dana for translating, and to Lauren for putting together such a beautiful book. The cover and the type and everything in here is really fantastic. And I just love the concept, the idea of like bringing together poets from different parts of the world to kind of talk to each other in a way that doesn't like privilege just the U.S. and the English language, that we can have like both languages together, and to have kind of all these works that present lots of strategies and ideas for how to deal with the modern world. I'm going to read a couple of poems that are in here. This first one is a kind of take on a haibun. There was a period where I was kind of going through a nervous breakdown, and also at the same time learning how to read tarot cards. And so I started making these collaged pieces that pulled together language from these websites that I was going to kind of learn archetypal meanings of the cards, and then kind of mixing things together with music I was listening to at the time, and movies and things like that. So it kind of comes out as a little surreal narrative piece that I felt like kind of fit with the idea of the Barroco. So this first one is called Geomantic. Do these things always have to look at you? I see bluebirds fly. Sometimes we need a little push from the weather. It's a Monday, so mundane my brain makes drugs to keep fate has a funny way of rearranging. The jays take shapes and prepare to return to you. Have to open yourself to receive. I watch them go. I'm not that good at breathing. Gradually, we learn the trick of connecting personality to pentagrams. In the symbol, we have the feminine interchanging forces and form. Fortune is not the same as luck. This is not a roulette wheel of all my sins so unoriginal are a fist. This refers to a completion of that chip on your shoulder gets bigger and bigger, sends back those personalities that are unready for this carnival of carnivores. Karma governs sleeping souls, the vibrations the planets move in their allotted courses. Goodbye and good luck to everything in motion, turning with all the self-loathing of a wolf. The better to eat you with, but you can't hold it. It develops the complexity of myths. Wisdom cannot be expressed in rational terms. If A smokes, then C smolders in flame. When the fire is burning out, we know there is more inside than we can see. That animal, that music can move. If I puked up a sonnet of crickets, would you say it was beauty? The feminine beyond the form played with When You Wish Upon a Star. Your dreams never held the bow at the right angle is also a musical instrument because you hunt by enchantment. Fate steps in. I'm going to go where my urge leads to failure. An ouch lies in our own hands. Imagine yourself a psychodynamic force that operates a power tool known as your body. You're still here, but I'm having trouble breathing and what we're really thinking, so I guess I'll do some gardening. We are fooling ourselves. Fearing discomfort feels like a funnel, a magnifying glass setting fire to the tomatoes on the front porches of our psyches. Failure is not the problem. The aware know that logic can be destructive. It is important to refuse to tolerate this is based on a misunderstanding ain't dying to offend you. I've just got a dyslexic heart chisel that cleaved away what was not the image thinking about staying. Or are you just playing, making gifts form into an animal cleverness? A fish doesn't have feet, but every body has other dimensional realms. Pass me a napkin. It's psychic information. A pinch connects energy for a soul recognition. Let me ask you a question. Why does it seem our internal emotional landscape is erased each time we are born? This is not a dream. This is where you are experiencing a wound. There's imperfection in this cube, but we are here. We are inhuman. So picture your body full of so many tools, your own physician. And here's a shorter one. I've been doing these postcard poems every August, and I kind of do them as a whole cycle. So this is from a couple of years ago when we had that big eclipse that went across the United States. This is Oracle for an Eclipsed America, number 32. The combined forces of Western civilization united the past things that have vanished, use only numbers for bodies that classify as minor, the oldest religious symbols of humanity. A large white cross dominates the landscape, physical exposure turned into potential nightmares, a people turned extreme together, dragged into the presence of the sinister stars and the violent holy rollers, the noise of thunder, the beasts, their reflexes run away with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Hello? Hello? Thank you, Matt. Matt Trease also wrote a wonderful introduction to the anthology that is also translated. So thank you for that too. Our next reader is Nadine Antoinette Maestas. Nadine, are you here? Nadine Maestas is a poet's poet and believes that the empire of the sentence is an extremely oppressive, totalitarian regime. She prefers the company of poems so much that she would rather read a bad poem than a good novel. But when she is not doing poetry, Nadine loves mountain biking and trail running in dangerous and remote places in the Northwest. That last part kind of sounds like your Tinder profile. Let's see, where was I? She teaches creative writing and literature in San Francisco and New Hampshire, has facilitated writing workshops through Youth Speaks, and has helped to pioneer poetry workshops in several public schools in California and Michigan. Nadine holds an MFA from the University of Michigan's Helen Zell Writers Program, where she was awarded a Farrar Award for playwriting. Her hybrid poem play, Helen on Wheels, a play of rhyme and reason, was performed at California College of the Arts. She is the co-author with Karen Weiser of Beneath the Bright Discus, and is a co-editor for the poetry anthology Make It True, Poetry from Cascadia. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Nadine Antoinette Maestas.
Miss, huh, Thomas? When are you gonna start calling me doctor? Thank you for that introduction. I have to add like 8 more things to that. So I just want to thank the editors and translators. I just met the translators tonight. They translated my big whale poem, Ahab Mayhem, into Spanish, and it is fucking awesome. It's now titled Ahab Pandemonio. And I was like, why didn't I title it that in the first place? And now my family's gonna be like so proud. So originally I'm from New Mexico. I'm not native to this bioregion, despite what my face looks like and what everyone assumes. I'm New Mexican, and I moved here to go to graduate school, and I just love it, and decided to stay for as long as I can. And in honor of the anthology tonight, I thought I would read some poems that I write about the other bioregion down south. So I'm going to read some poems about a very popular figure named La Llorona. I don't know if anybody knows what La Llorona is. Yeah, so La Llorona, you know, when you grow up in New Mexico, you grow up with your aunts and your uncles and your grandparents and your parents terrifying you with stories of La Llorona. You know, when you're crying, they'll tell you, my grandma and my aunts, everyone just say, stop crying, do you want La Llorona to come and take you away from us? It's like all the blame is on you. Every single bit of it. It's like, stop crying, because La Llorona is going to take you from us. You know, it's like a really dramatic, passionate love that's kind of manipulative. And it was also a way they would use us, they'd use this story to keep us away from the riverbeds. Because when it rains in New Mexico and it's dry, the water just comes rushing down the mountain and floods the arroyos, and then it just literally washes kids away, you know. So they're like, don't play in the arroyos. Do you want La Llorona to come and take you away from us? So I still, like, you know, have kind of terrifying feelings about La Llorona. Just like I saw the mouth of the Mississippi a couple years ago in Minneapolis, and I was like, oh my God, is that La Llorona across the river in Minneapolis? Oh, it's St. Paul. So, and I asked my family to tell me some stories about La Llorona, and they were like, I can't do that. They were really scared, so only one cousin of mine rose to the occasion. So, sometimes I like to sit and listen to the land, wherever I'm at. Except for when I was in Michigan, I didn't really like that land very much, and it didn't like me back. But wherever I am, I try and sit and listen to the land. And I started doing that as a child in New Mexico, when my grandmother taught me to do that. And I love doing it in the Northwest. I'm going to start this poem called The Old Ways. They seep into you, as water does to feed things. Out of them, stories grow. From the old ways, you learn to sit with the trees and the leaves. Of grasses, you hear their billowing and hoarse whispers others call wind, but you call song from the old ways. You learn to listen to the flowing narratives that rivers have to tell. how water comes off mountains and spills and crashes a path over and through the rocks that have stories too. Some about the fish and bug eggs living protected beneath their stories of origins from very hot volcano stuff. This is the first one. Got them out of order. La Llorona. I know an evening song of terrifying tears, of flooding the arroyos, and of the driest, reddest canyons, lugubrious La Llorona, wailing her song in the darkest morning hours, in the places that were once rivers, and wearing a translucent white gown. Some say she cries for the lost land, and was first heard in the years before the Spanish came. Some say she cried for her own children, murdered by her own hand. Some say she appears as a beautiful woman, and others say a rolling ball of fire that stills. Others claim to see an apparitional mist that cries for the poisoning of the water, for the drying of the rivers, and for the carelessness of the people. I say she sees the land as a material scene of forces and scorched hills and emptied cities reflecting complex civilizations. And I say that this evening song seems to know the most midnight of places. So I've been working on rewriting the La Llorona myth from some of the more female-centric perspectives. And I started sort of envisioning her as a water protector, or at least someone that's witnessing what's happening to what we're doing to the waters right now. I mean, she lives in the water, she haunts the rivers, looking for her dead children and mistakenly finding other people's children. She's in the water all the time. And I imagine that she's seeing everything we do to the water. La Llorona cries for the children, cries for the water at midnight, at 4 a.m., at the spark of light. She cries by the river as she watches the colors turn, orange, red, sickly green, blooming with algae. La Llorona takes the spirit of the Burundi women water protectors, the Indian women of the Narmada Valley in Cochabamba, the women in black in Juarez, who protest the unsolved murders of other women. She cries for the maquiladoras in the sweatshops.
Can you read that again? I'm just doing a Robert Bly thing here. Can you read that again?
Well, then I'll do the Kate Ryan thing and I'll read it again.
Great. Okay, it's terrific.
Okay, let me try that. I loosen up my lips sometimes. La Llorona cries for the children, cries for the water at midnight, at 4 a.m., at the spark of light. She cries by the river as she watches the colors turn, orange, red, sickly green, blooming with algae. La Llorona takes the spirit of the Burundi women, water protectors, the Indian women of the Narmada Valley in Cochabamba, the women in black in Juarez who protest the unsolved murder of other women. She cries for the maquiladoras in the sweatshops. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's terrific.
Thank you. This is just called Bone Chilling, and this is from a story that my cousin told me about her own seeing of La Llorona at the river. She sent me a video because she couldn't write it. She was sweating by the end of it. Bone chilling. When La Llorona is near, you'll know it in your bones. So deeply, the marrow will freeze from the feeling of a kind of death and grief that no one should ever know. And I'm just going to read these two other Southwest poems. They're a little bit older. This is called The History of an Armadillo. Okay, armadillos are like super old. They're like pre-modern and post-modern little pill-bug dinosaurs. They're amazing and weird. History of an Armadillo. Pink dawn is to the cactus flower, sex is to the armadillo of love. Is to up until now, a Hallmark card could explain everything. Up until now is to red like red is to fisher the earth, molten earth. Mantle-cursed habits are so color-forming at the edge of God still. Forming at the mouth are letters to spell you out. Beauty out, like you were the last one holding up. Darwin said, It's your last stand. It's like breaking the ice, like spring is to evolution, ice evolution, ice evolution, ice evolution, ice evolution. By the lights, camera, action, he did exhale it like a fog all along the horizon of the rivers, ever after to the sea. When bacteria begat fish, and fish begat birds, and simultaneously begat amphibious land creatures, begat reptiles, begat mammals, and then disaster and breaking of the earth, and with consequence begat more mammals and even us. In the twilight righteous night and day, living like an armadillo in the millions of ever afters, with a back of true bone, digging in the true lavender for grubs among the cactus blooming purple and green. I guess I'm just realizing that I'm into also things I imagine that are witnessing like millennia in the world, and I sort of imagine armadillos doing that as well. This is called Blood and Liquor If You're Shot. I read Cormac McCarthy's novel Blood Meridian several years ago and just started crying. And I was like, what an asshole. You know? And I was like, motherfucker, I'm gonna write a poem about that.
Brutal, terrifying.
Yeah, so he was, you know, he's like writing about my home, you know, and it was just really, it's a good book, but I was just like, damn. Okay, so Blood and Liquor If You're Shot. I'm such a gunslinger, for you tell me such idiosyncratic things have no end, but rather we achieve transformation. And I believe you lying upon the desert ground, wild things grow and bloom such rare beauty like an uprising. Cactus, lavender, sage, so bone-weary rare formed for the extravagance of I'm so bursting fire spots in the west, all along the I'm so heretic red, so turbulent, winded, like a desert spring. I live like that wild, wild west as they come, young and rough, my so delicate cowboy ego drifting smoke, fresh deaths in my head. In a slaughter no one is left to lift the dead, so they stay sometimes among the living, sometimes just wandering the land of rattling snakes and blood-sucking bats, half-eaten raw meat. Picture those grossly rotted fields, the effluvium of the west, the steaming desert plains and star-crunched blue-black skies, all night by the fire cockfighting like I'm a lover and a knife and boot fighter, then all bacon on horseback ready and beans filling a sack leaving, the sun at my back, the Paleolithic desert light, my murderous hero with a leathering face, all hawkish squint and furrowed brows. You've been shot, dozens or more times 10, in the calf, grazed to the left ear, like an aside to the stomach, the bullet spoke a hole right through you. A rifle and shoulder, such love like an outlaw is. Thank you guys.
Nadine. How's everybody doing? Is everyone feeling okay?
Love the cheers.
Love the chairs. Does anyone just need to stand up? Yeah, please feel free to stand up. You can do that too. Hi everyone. Yes. Okay. Alright.
Step away from the bar. Do not go over to the bar. I just said stand up.
All right. Our next reader is Claudia Castro Luna. Claudia Castro Luna is the Poet Laureate of Washington State. She served as Seattle's first civic poet from 2015 to 2017. You know what that means. Next is obviously Poet Laureate of the United States, right? Yeah. She is the author of Killing Marias and Of This City. Born in El Salvador, she came to the United States in 1981 fleeing civil war. Living in English and Spanish, Claudia writes and teaches in Seattle where she gardens and keeps chickens with her husband and their 3 children. Claudia Castro Luna.
Good evening, everyone. What an enormous pleasure to be here. I'm so glad I was able to make it. Paul, thank you so much for your labor of love. To you too. thank you. I know that the book is gorgeous. I feel like I am at a birth. It's Mother's Day this weekend, perhaps that's why my head went there, but when I saw the book, I came in before there was anyone in the hall and stood around and looked at the books and went straight for the book and thought, what a gorgeous, just what a gorgeous result, you know? Something like this doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of time. You could feel the time and the effort and the thought and the care that went into making this book. So thank you so much. It's such an honor to be part of it. It's such an honor to be here today. I travel quite a bit. I'm doing quite a bit of traveling across the state. This explains my getting here right up until the beginning of the reading. I took the ferry across at Clinton, so I drove the length of Whidbey Island rather than coming over 5, and it was such a gorgeous drive in the setting sun with the sun on my face as I made my way up the island, and I kept on thinking of, I keep on turning around what a definition of poetry is. Because I've had the privilege of witnessing so many poetry communities across the state and beyond, really. And the word that kept on looping back into my mind as I was trying to figure it out, I'm going to be at a high school in Bellingham on Monday, trying to figure out how to explain this work to students, how to explain what poetry is. And the word love kept on coming back. And then I get here and I see the books and I see the hall, and it's such a great place. And I think that is the operating word for what we do as writers and readers of poetry, as people who keep it alive through, look who's here. People who keep it alive through putting together fantastic moments and experiences for us to come together in peace, really. I mean, every time I'm in a room like this, I think the power of the word to bring us together in peace. We are gathered in an active, with active agency to relish community in peace. And I think that is transformative. I think that's revolutionary. And when I think of what this book is doing, I think it's revolutionary. I think in a time, Pepe is not here, but Pepe Montero said, you know, to be writing in Spanish at this time in this country is the most radical thing we could be doing, actually. And to have a book that is completely translated into both languages from a variety of writers, you know, who, I mean, I speak Spanish as well, I come from Latin America, so I have perhaps a slight affinity to that language. But there's many of us in here who do not. And for our words to be embodied in both languages and appeared with such care and love, I think that is a radical act. And I thank you all the more for that, for showing what we could do. You know, this is a silent but very powerful resistance in a way. I mean, we're not shouting, we're not out there tweeting away negative things, right? We're celebrating, and I think that's just really amazing. And so when I saw my poems translated into the Spanish, it was like a birth. Because, of course, I wrote these poems in English and they appear here in Spanish, and so I read them for the first time this afternoon. So what I like to do is just read 2 of the poems, both in English and Spanish. The English, of course, the original, which is what I wrote them in, and then the translation, which is such an enormous treat. Thank you. So the first poem is actually the first poem that appears in the book Killing Marias, and it's titled Maria. And talk about convergences, your poem about Juarez, what you read, all of these poems are about Juarez and the murdered and disappeared women of Juarez, and so they bear the names of the actual victims. So, Maria, somos todas una, protégenos, madrecita. We are all one, in your image made, hermanas, linked, backstitched to the edge of your brilliant robe. Like you, we have aureolas smooth and nipples hard. Like you, we have a nested swallow cave and a life-giving cut. All about you is harmonious and divine. Nacre of the deepest ocean, star of purple skies, your divinity surges inside each of us. Maria, we are all one. Protect us, sweet mother. Somos todas una, a tu semejanza hechas sisters, unidas, cosidas por atrás a la orilla de su brillante falda. Al igual que tú, poseemos suaves aureolas y tiesos pezones. Al igual que tú, tenemos una cueva anidapájaros y una hendida que engendra vida. Todo de ti es armonía y deidad, nácar del más hondo océano, estrella de cielos púrpuros. Tu divinidad surge dentro de cada una de nosotras. Gracias. And then this one. Maria de Jesús, mother of weeping rocks. It starts early, before you learn to speak, even before you leave the hospital, in your mother's arms, that your body is not your own, that women's paychecks are cut short, that women's wombs remain law-controlled. You'd think after all these years things would be different. The pink that casts your gender, a diaphanous cage passing as rosy charm, a fine chainmail to be worn at all times. María de Jesús, Madre de las Rosas Llorosas. Empieza temprano, antes de que empieces a hablar, aún antes de que salgas del hospital, en los brazos de tu madre, que tu cuerpo no es tuyo, que recorta los salarios de las mujeres, que los úteros de las mujeres están bajo control legal. Uno pensaría que después de todos estos años las cosas serían diferentes. El rosa que presagia tu género, una jaula diáfana que pasa por rosa encantador, una fina cota de malla que se lleva puesta siempre. And then I'll close just by reading this poem, María Isabel, Hug of the Earth. This is a poem when I was writing about this. It's a poem about death, and it's a poem about birds, and it's a poem about poetry and things that are able to inhabit and defy borders. And in a way, I think that's what we're doing. That's what this map is also about. Is a defying of geopolitical borders in this case. And the poem, of course, again, a defying of this notion that things are that things are set in a binomial way, and we know better. We know better to know that things are all connected, and they're not either this or that, but all of it at once. María Isabel, Hug of the Earth. Pensive, they sit on telephone wires like apparitions from the beyond. Winged creatures, evolutionary mutants, birds habit in two worlds. They sing with breath of the living and stain wingtips with death's dust. When bodies get buried, souls climb to the heavens. Birds greet these newly dead on their way up, where there are no harsh edges, no adrenaline, only time. Bird is blissful and plaintive. Birds sing on earth, sing on heaven, the same songs. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. All right, we have two more readers. Stephen Collis is our next reader. Stephen Collis is the author of 5 books of poetry, including the Dorothy Livesey. Take 2.
Good enough, go.
Dorothy Livesey Poetry Prize-winning On the Material, and 3 parts of the ongoing Barricades project. Anarchive, The Commons, and To the Barricades. An activist and social critic, His writing on the Occupy movement is collected in Dispatches from the Occupation. Collis is also the author of 2 book-length studies, Phyllis Webb and the Common Good, and Through Words of Others, Susan Howe. Through Words, these are long titles. Through Words of Others, Susan Howe and Anarcho-Scholasticism. I'm gonna get fired from this job. As well as the editor with Graham Lyons of Reading Duncan Reading, Robert Duncan and the Poetics of Derivation. He teaches contemporary poetry and poetics at Simon Fraser University, where he was a 2011-12 Jack and Doris Shadbolt Fellow. Stephen Collis, everyone.
That was a bizarre and out-of-date biography. I hate biographies, especially.
Who gave me these?
I know, who gave you that? That's like at least 6 years out of date. But anyway, that's good. I'm trying to get punchier, shorter titles. I just want to acknowledge the unceded Coast Salish territory that we're on tonight as well. It always means a lot to me just to be in that space as a lifelong uninvited guest and try and think seriously about it every time I do anything public, to think of what it means to be here, because my grandparents thought there might be better jobs here than there were in Scotland and England. So I didn't ask to be here, and sometimes I feel pretty bad about being here. Anyway, not bad, but just strange about being here. Thank you to Paul and Thomas and Jose and Alejandro and Dana for translating, and Lauren for designing, publishing, and everything else, as everyone's saying. But it's wonderful to be in a book like this. It's such a privilege to be translated, and to be with all the other poets in here, and to have this chance to say thank you to everyone, because it really is a gift. I'm going to read my poem. It's in the anthology. I don't have the anthology yet still, so I'm going to read from the original. But my poem that's in the anthology is one part of a long poem, and there it is. And I'm going to read, I'll still read it here. And I'm going to read one part of the poem that's in the anthology, if it makes any sense. Just to hone in on the part of this poem that's really a tribute to a fellow Cascadian poet, Peter Cully, who passed away in 2015, I guess now. And who, was that right, 2015? Because he was going to headline at Cascadia Poetry Festival in Nanaimo, which is his hometown. But he passed away right before the festival, unexpectedly and at quite a young age. And he's truly a Cascadian poet, and I think a Baroque poet in a lot of ways. And I think that this is kind of a Baroque poem. So just a few stanzas that are really directly dedicated to Peter. Peter, I see the South Wellington slag heaps of my grandmother. The bucolic forests of my childhood were filled with the hulking stumps of 100 years gone old-growth forest, logged as colonial gold. Nothing is pure but our longing. Everywhere, what is beneath the land is more valuable than what is on the land. Somewhere there's a road under nearly constant construction, and you can't walk on it or to it, but you can view it. Its weathered orange traffic cones and faltering yellow rust machines. From a railway bed, the tracks and ties of which have long been removed. Perhaps a dog the color of your autumn photographs accompanies you. Perhaps the slag heaps of productive systems past swan about dark and foreboding just behind the line of alder trees, recent as last month's rent. What use this piece of turf, Peter? What use if we do not cull it? Take wildflowers for midsummer frolics, common even this untenable commons. Or like weather vanes, turn ourselves away, creak out of wind words that doff temporality, go ourselves to ward off wisdoms and camber by the machines of wealth, gone and turntable, gone out of doors. Oh, Nanaimo wasteland memories, here on the brief crease of Earth's crust we name beauty, life if you'd like to know, is the capture of carbon from carbon dioxide via photosynthesis. This same carbon synthesized in the giant hearts of stars taken up here on Earth by cyanobacteria. I know I'm saying that word wrong. Cyanobacteria? Good enough. Making their body, how do you translate that, right? Same word. Making their bodies from star carbon and releasing oxygen so that the evolution of plants increased the long-term stability of the Earth's climate, making it more amenable to complex life. As inside our cells, mitochondria and chloroplasts are endosymbionts. They once existed as autonomous organisms outside of us. Their carbon is now our carbon meshed. Was sunlight, was stars, is no fancy to extend the obligation of gratitude to insensate things. Quote William Wordsworth. Citizen prokaryote, also proclaiming from barricades of microscale, we are all in this together. My most recent book that just came out in the fall is a prose book, kind of a memoir about another Cascadian poet, Phyllis Webb, who at 92 years old still lives on her own on Salt Spring Island. She's about 30 years into a writer's block, essentially. She hasn't written in 30 years and every day feels the pain of that. And I wanted to write a book about what it means to be a writer who doesn't write. And maybe that's something meaningful in today's world. So from the back of the book, I'm not going to read from it, but I'll read a quote from the book that's on the back of the book, which says, "I go to see her because she is poetry's old crone." She didn't quite like me calling her. I've been visiting her for years. Usually 3-4 times a year I go because it is a small ministration I can perform for her and for her poetry as she slowly reaches into the finite, a long, slow embrace of nothing. If living is a process of learning how to die, then is writing a process of learning how to stop writing. I go in search of lost words, in search of the hoped-for defense against the loss of words, drawn to the shaping sound of fate and mortality. There's a lot about place and Cascadia in that book, a lot about the geo-region, I'd say, especially the islands, just out there. I'm going to read a couple poems from a manuscript in progress. It's called Future Imperfect. They are sort of a long poem about time, about grammar, excitingly, and the apocalypse. Happy things I'm writing about these days. I'm in my mid-50s and I'm not yet adjusting to the age I'm at. I can't see anything up here. I'm like, better light, glasses, something needs to happen, but I'm trying. So what will happen between this unusually warm November and an unspecified... My aging eyes, thank you. And hopefully it's not painful. So what will happen between this unusually warm November and an unspecified but nearing future, when it will have warmed however many degrees Celsius above this present stretching global mean, asking for a friend? I feel tense. Give me a tense, such as actions that will be completed before some other event in the future. Plot a line, A, present, to B, future. And place the future perfect somewhere between those points, but who knows what ontological status B has now is the problem. If we don't know where we're going, how will we know when we've gone too far? Hashtag capitalism. To make our future perfect, there must be a deadline we work towards. Now to then, the breach coming between, we choose, I choose you, I choose all of you, let's do this now and then. Say, we will always have been living in the future just like this. Say, we will have always been pondering the course of history unfolding. Say, our descendants will have always been thinking, what were they thinking when thinking about us and all those thoughtful days to come? But there is no future imperfect in English. There is no tense in which what is to come is not deadline, but state of continuity. I want to state some continuity. Look at the climate and say, my grammar did this to me. My grammar and my economy. Because I could not stop the apocalypse, it kindly stopped for me. It lay aside its summer fires. It gave up rising seas. We slowly walked. We were not quick. There was no need to hurry. The cars were parked. The trains had stopped. No one was there to worry. Dark computers in lifeless ranks and silent cell phones lay all about the empty places. People had worked and played. I was shown the heavy metals, the radioactive wastes. I saw the keeling curve keep curving despite the change of pace. Time I could no longer fathom. I asked if this was when the deck chairs rearranged themselves. The trail of tears began. The future seemed already writ in secret, unread notes, archived beneath the plastic seas we sailed in sunken boats. Thank you, Emily. Something occurs or appears in the present. We think it lay in our future, waiting for us. Now it is here, sprung out at us. A moment later, it has passed, moving on and disappears behind us. Is in the past now, this now, fixed. What's the hurry? Craning our necks, history, the grass grown over battlefields, receding. Or we are mobile walkers moving forward through time towards these future objects or events which we then arrive at, pass, leave behind us, call it progress. Moss doesn't grow on a rolling stone. We, in a hurry, tick-tock, move along, nothing to see here. What's next? What's next, my friend? Have you cut the grass yet? It's spring. Or maybe time is like space and we are located now in relation to various thens and whens, arrayed all about in a temporal landscape, field or prairie. It's all relative, but if we walk for 24 hours in any direction, go ahead, you choose. We will always arrive tomorrow, never yesterday. This is the problem. I'm not actually sure where the exit is or how long the grass has grown. Okay, a couple more minutes. Mostly I look quickly at the latest reports through the cracks between my fingers, out the corner of my eye, look away quickly, calculate the years to collapse. A, grass dies. B, human beings die. C, human beings are grass. It's years, right? Rolling fields of us all relative, the wind bending the blades back before the dawn, all in the same direction, rippling wave and particle, dying in drought, coming back green in the spring, the colors. We forget the colors of the grasses, their flowers, lead, purple, pewter, scarlet, like a fever, so small yet so very many. The detail is lost in the collective sheen, intercalary meristem, spiralate movement. We're all relatives. That was then, this is now. The plow is in the sky, the earth is tilled by no one. A, all civilizations collapse. B, you call this a civilization? I thought of the push of people, planetary valves, the purchase of propinquity. Is what we mean by silk? Skein or veil, skin, water, feathers through fingers, light falling through trees. That part of it that made it to the ground. That part of the people made it over or through the border to safety. Is this the way? Stroking the melody, the worm weaving softness, the pattern of light and woven shadow we pass through beneath the trees, animal, anima, animate, humming, universal love. Last poem. It's called Fucking Poetry. Fucking poetry. I have given you everything. The ache of each arcing curl, slash, and curve of letter form, forming words from mere sounds as round and round anxiety whispered more and more anxious. Go, you are healed, you are free, go. Fucking poetry. And where are you now? In the long silence of not reading, we create in our writing minds, texting nothing but invisible wind bodied forth in outflung boughs of electric currents. I'm a sucker forever for the wallflower, for paths diverging in snowy woods and the sharp cry of the killdeer, the merest whisper. You are poetry, fucking poetry. Fucking poetry. Even in the apocalypse, you are writing me. Because this is what we did the last apocalypse too, singing into the fires which kept some few remaining coals glowing long into the aftermath, the shattered night we sing through. And so we go on singing because we are poetry too, and this is poetry.
Thank you, Stephen. That was great. Our final reader, Shin Pai, is the author of several books of poetry, including Enzo, Ozarks. Is that pronounced correctly? Yes. Adamantine and Equivalence. I feel like I'm just learning them. Maybe it's.
You can do it. We're with you.
After this, we have a break. Yes.
Yes.
And then at 9 o'clock, the next reading starts.
I think so.
Yes. And there's beer in between them.
And dancing. And dancing.
And dancing. Okay. Shin Pai. She has been a featured presenter at national and international literary festivals, including the Geraldine Dodge Poetry Festival and the Montreal Zen Poetry Festival. She has served as an artist in residence for Seattle Art Museum, Town Hall Seattle, and Pacific Science Center, and is a former member of the Speakers Bureau for Humanities Washington. She lives and works in Seattle's Bitter Lake neighborhood, and I sincerely hope this bio is also not 10 years old. Shin Pai.
Is this okay? Yes, great. Thank you to Paul and everybody that was involved in the production of this beautiful anthology and this festival, and for including my work. So I'm going to read the piece that I contributed to the anthology. It's a piece called Chibi, which was the pet or nickname for a cabaret singer named Pat Suzuki, who some of you may know. She was very well known in Seattle and made her career in Belltown specifically. This piece was written for a history cabaret that was performed at the Rendezvous Theater. The theater approached me and asked me to write a piece about a historic person or celebrity connected to Belltown. And I looked at the range of possibilities that I could possibly write about, and Pat Suzuki's story resonated for me in particular. She was interned as a young child in Camp Amachi and rose to stardom to eventually perform on Broadway. So this is a poem in her honor. And Chibi, her pet name actually means squirt or little one. She was the youngest of 5 children. Chibi. In the vintage footage, old Blue Eyes calls her Patricia, insisting, "You can't get anywhere as a singer unless you're Italian." But Frank, I'm Japanese, she protested. "I'm from Seattle." The home she chose, it was the easiest of times, you know. I didn't have any responsibilities. At the age of 11, little Chiyoko, the all-American girl, sent packing to the high plains, locked up at Grenada War Relocation Center for the crime of being descended from the Japanese. States away from the family farm in Cressy to be imprisoned with 3 older sisters, her parents only 6 years of elementary schooling behind her, news of the outside world filtering into camp over the airwaves, in between radio transmissions of swing and big band. How does suffering shape a life? Behind barbed wire, imprisoned children grew up to be poet, printmaker, nightclub singer, Lawson, Inada, Arthur, Okamura, Pat, Suzuki. The record reaching back so far we strain to hear the past. In place of cooking or setting the table, kids played house, standing in imaginary mess hall lines. Over camp, Boy Scouts raised the flag pledging a country that has shunned us. Thin-walled tar paper barracks can't block the biting chill of winter. Floating over barbed wire, the jade rabbit pounds mochi in the full moon. 107 deaths, 412 births, 7,500 prisoners. The makeshift city, 10th largest in Colorado. Boys' Day. Fish streamers fly over barracks, the largest carp to honor an oldest son. The silk vest handmade for a boy's deployment, 1,000 red knots, each hand-tied by a different detainee. 6 guard towers armed with machine guns, here for our own safety. Wheezing from fever, she reshapes the mattress, the canvas bag stuffed full of hay. Before raising the camp, the last act, building a marker for the dead. As Suzuki, she arrived in Seattle, performing at the Colony Club in 2,000 consecutive shows. Her ex-husband Norm described how she sashayed off the street, a half-pint gammon at 22 years old, to camping from a bit part at the moor, where she was cast as a minor oriental in Tea House of the Autumn Moon, after touring Kansas City, St. Louis, Los Angeles, to take up residency in Belltown. Discovered one night like Bing Crosby, Miss Ponytail. She was Seattle's first musician to make it big. 100 pounds of Nisei dynamite with a voice that could loosen the tiles on Broadway's towers. From 4th and Virginia to Broadway, New York, a recording contract within 6 months to be cast 3 years later in the role of Linda Lowe, the stripper in Flower Drum Song. Her signature tune, I Love Being a Girl. We question why a rising star might quit a bright career in New York theater, preferring podunk clubs or motherhood over art. She embraced the person that she already was. Turned away from the defining roles that keep us captive, sex toy, servant, exotic, mistress, chorus girl, internee, to find herself at home in a cabaret of her own making, that place where she saw herself reflected in the pale white faces of the public, where she shattered stereotype, inhabiting her skin, flush with more than anyone from Camp Amachi could ever dream. So I'm going to read more recent poems, none of which have really been published or read much, but I'm going to start with a quick suite of poems that were written after my travels to the land of the Thunder Dragon last year, Bhutan. As an ancient Buddhist kingdom, I work for a company that sent me to go to Bhutan as a fixer for a very complex trip that involved taking care of a group of travelers of about 15, 17 people. So it was a lifelong dream of mine to go to Bhutan as a Tibetan Buddhist, and these were the poems that sort of arose out of that experience. Where you go beyond the palace walls of the mind, see the half-clothed child at the roadside stand, hear the howl of street dogs that keep you awake at night. To be born, these words rising in me, I say for all living beings. The gift. In another land, I ask permission to take from the fig tree. My guide says, the Bhutanese believe plucking a leaf is akin to cutting the throats of 1,000 monks. Here, he says, let me do that for you. How is this one? So, one of my tour guides and companions on this particular trip was a man named Sonam Tenzin, who is literally the strong man of Bhutan. So he is the ruling title holder and competed in a competition that was sponsored by the king and queen. It's an institutionalized competition that's been around for 5 years, but has existed for like time immemorial. The sort of role of strongmen in this sort of agricultural ancient culture is quite important. And so I was very lucky to have this man as my companion on this trip. And he was a really significant person to me in that he was charged with taking care of us. And so that meant if we were not well enough to travel or to be mobile, and in the case of one of my sort of travel companions, there was an elderly man who needed to be carried down a mountain, basically, after going up to look at a temple. And so Sonam Tenzin scooped up this 235-pound man on his back and basically brought him down a hill. So we were extremely lucky to have this person looking out for us, and I think as an example of another model of what masculinity and tenderness can be, he was very moving to me. So this is Trongsa Zongkag Nago E for Sonam Tenzin. The strong man from Trongsa turns his face away when the medical aide plunges the needle into my upper arm. The emergency room bathed in morning light where he brings me, when I slip and lose my footing near the irrigation ditch on the path to Chimilakan. A landscape painted in phalluses. In the grainy streaming video, I watch his tiny figure compete in log dragging, wood chopping, heaving giant tires across a field to secure an honor. The veteran of war on the tour, our frailest traveler, falters, hobbled years ago by yacht injury. Lucky to walk again, he maneuvered with hiking poles, and when he tired, the strong man carries the 235-pound grown-up down the dirt path atop his back to the edge of Supsika village. When I turn back to look, he's holding the old man's hand, tending to those who can't move as quickly, walking by my own side on the ascent to Tiger's Nest. He shares a dream of nearly finishing engineering school, in his 4th year to be expelled for an error made in youth. I regard the tattoo on his left arm that brings him regret, concealed beneath the sleeve of his tartan go, the pain of old mistakes, to feel one's worth, the might to strain forward into the emerging. And just some short haiku-like poems about that experience of being in Bhutan. On the road to Tiger's Nest, mistaking bird calls from Chinese tourists as cries of pain. Ascending the dusty path, my companion, the sharpened walking stick. Advised to arm myself with a rock to guard against wild dogs, I discard the stone in a ditch. The duct tape prayer book, property of the studious monk. Animal hide glue binds painted canvas to a temple wall. Good merit for all sentient beings. Rice grains in the window seat at the temple, remnants of offerings. And I just have a few more, relatively short. So this piece is called Tidying Up. It's inspired by Marie Kondo. Some of you may know her from her Netflix series. But before that, she wrote a New York Times best-selling book about organizing and cleaning up that's based deeply in her sort of value system as a practitioner of Shinto. Tidying up. When I retire my son's well-worn clothes to the consignment pile, I reach for the maternity outfit stowed beneath the marriage bed. Reconsider the hand-me-down dress given to me by the Bellevue mom, who conceived again after a miscarriage. The nursing short, won by my college roommate after the birth of her boy. The new dress I bought myself on my non-profit paycheck. Things I can't let go, no spark of joy, yet some other category of worth. Invested with the energy of an immutable line of mothers, the aura of fecundity. Garments that hum with divine life, my child, now 5, reaching towards gratitude to give thanks for such. Starshine. In the search for signs of intelligent life, we are blinded by want of a twin. We measure flux gunned through a telescope, seeking the sun that comes right at us, to shine its light upon a distant world still unborn, but of the mind bathed in starlight. In the search for signs of intelligent life, we were blinded by want of a twin. Her face turned towards you in resonance. We plot confirmation from the spheres that were there at birth, mapping the gap between cosmos to astrum, revealing mysteries of atmosphere, chasing heavenly transits. In the search for signs of intelligent life, blinded by want of a twin. Here, in the burning traversion of bodies, our positions sculpted by gravity in an order yet unnamed, the outlying being takes leave. In the search for signs of intelligent life, we are blinded by want of a twin. And this is the last piece. It's called Ashide no Yo. It's a garden poem, and it's for Jason Tetsi Zenworth. An eastern red-eared terrapin turtle moves with the pace of stone. The long crawl out of Lake Washington into the daylight of Mapes Creek. Sight of an old stump farm, awakening a memory of land. Clear-cut and harvested in the time of the Heian, to imagine a woodland forest where one was once removed, transformed by rock, stood upright to impart the heart spirit. Horsetail rushes embedded in a boulder 12,000 years ago. Permutations of the natural order flow through weeping spruce. There, in the cataract of blue atlas, water slaps against stone. An orange koi glides alongside a choir of black carp. The bronze bell still throbbing. Thank you.